Yep, got it. Good evening, everyone. Like to call the RSU 57 Finance Committee meeting to order. We'll do a quick poll of members present on the committee. Suzanne Bauer is out this evening, but I think she has someone that's going to be coming to replace her. Oh, she can't make it? Oh, thanks, Jody. Eric. Jennifer. Here. Mark.
Here.
Judith.
Present.
And Wes is present, so we have 5 out of 6 members. We have a quorum. The meeting is formally called to order. Any adjustments to the agenda?
There are none.
Hearing none, is there any public comment this evening? All righty. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes? Could we get a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the previous meeting? We have a motion by Judith, second by Eric. Any discussion?
Keep forgetting that I can't raise my hand.
Judith has the floor.
I had a question about the minutes. It was under section F, which is business managers communications, and it was paragraph 2. Was an error made there with regards to the fiscal year? It said fiscal year 26-27. Should that have read 25-26?
Nope, 26-27 is correct
Okay.
because we're doing subsidy work right now, which the Department of Ed will evaluate in order to determine subsidy for the 26-27 year.
Okay, so we think that far ahead.
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All in favor? Unanimous? Director of Finance, Communication. Oh, sorry about
I
that.
forgot my own papers, so I needed my own papers. Just a couple things for this evening. October is deadline month for various state reporting. And I just wanted to let you know that right now we're on top of all of those things just to give you some idea of what the types of reports that are due this month, other than quarterly payroll taxes and those types of things, which we get every quarter. Annual reporting includes enrollment, which Shane and his team and Nancy are working on, staffing, which Sandy and the business office are working on, staffing reports, various sick bank reports, as well as seniority listings for the association for teacher seniority. So those are the most major or significant reports. And in all of those cases, we're on track in order to meet the required deadlines. So I just wanted to quickly mention that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that with our negotiations with Modular Genius for the modular, those negotiations are now between Modular Genius's attorney and the district's attorney. We are at a point where both sides are now represented by legal counsel in order to try to resolve our differences. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. And as that progresses and there's information for me to be able to share, I will share that. But I did want to make you aware that that is now between both legal counsels in order to resolve our differences. And that's all I have for this evening.
Any further questions on the Finance Director's communication? Hearing none, move to G, Transportation Update.
If you didn't pass out from how short that is, this is going to be even shorter. I have no update for this evening. I gave you a pretty thorough update last week. So if you're still in your seat from item F, you now fell out on item G. I'm feeling okay. I am
It's
feeling
amazing.
okay. It's a valid question, though.
Any questions about transportation from the committee? Seeing none. H, School Revolving Renovation Fund, SRRF update.
I probably shouldn't go backwards, but real quickly, Richie will be doing a report to the full board at next Wednesday's school board meeting. So he'll also be updating the full board on transportation. School revolving renovation, we are at literally the finals, crossing Ts and dotting Is on the application. That will be completed tomorrow. This again is for the Alfred roof and structural upgrades to that roof. That whole packet will be going out with the board agenda for next week's meeting and will require board approval. Once the board approves it, it will then be delivered before the October 31st deadline to the Maine Department of Ed. After that, I would anticipate from what the DOE has posted that they will issue their final priority listing in mid-January. And after that, they will issue certificates for those who've been awarded approval and funding. They will do that by the end of January. So we are poised at this point. We're in the process of producing requests for proposals. Those will go out in accordance with that timeline so that once we find out in late January, early February, if we're approved, we'll determine what kind of RFP we issue. And by that, I mean, will we be approved and have a likely chance that we'll get 40% or so funding from the state, and then the rest paid over 10 years. We still would require public hearing and voter approval, but I think that would be the next step in the process. This is a two-phase project. It would require, because of the scope and depth of work, it would be done over the summers of summer of 26 and also the summer of 2027. So that is the sequence. Those are the next steps. I would like, if the committee would so desire, is to just move that forward to the board for their review and approval. You don't necessarily have to vote on it, just to acknowledge in the minutes that I've informed you along the way that this is the next step in the process and that you're all in agreement to move that forward to the full board.
What's the pleasure of the committee? We have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second.
I didn't hear the motion.
But-
For the second. The mics weren't on.
Oh, okay. I'll let Jennifer put her mic on and make the motion.
Make a motion that we pass it forward to the full board
Okay.
to vote on.
I second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Motion by Jen, second by Mark. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous?
Thank you. A lot of work went into that application. A lot of people were involved, including our own folks as in the operations and business office side, but also our engineers and our consultants. So thank you. I think this is a really good application. It's a very thorough application. I hope for success at the state level. So thank you.
Nice work. The next agenda item is J, capital planning update.
The next would be budget process. So item I.
Oh, yeah. Review of the budget process and schedule, item I.
So I did hand out last year's budget schedule, and this is the time of year we typically start having a conversation about the budget process. So this is the schedule we utilized last year. Again, meetings were on Wednesday last year. This committee had a lot of discussion, for those who weren't on the committee, about the timeline and do we meet every week? Do we not meet every week? Do we meet every other week? And it was decided last year to meet every week, especially for January going into February. And then the committee would decide based upon where the progress was, what they felt they needed for additional meetings. This year's a little different. The committee schedule is on a Tuesday. Last year, just about every other meeting, the second and fourth anyhow, were really backed up against a school board meeting. So it really only allowed an hour and a half on those nights at most, really less than that by the time you start and allow a transition. So I bring that forward just as a point of discussion. Usually when we adopt this schedule, we start at the end and we work backwards. The schedule on page 2, I've highlighted in yellow, May 5th. It would be the tentative date based upon past history of when we would have the district budget meeting at the middle school. And that's on page 2, highlighted in yellow. And the referendum in this district is typically done on statewide voting date in June, which for next year will be June 9th. June 9th, you certainly can choose a different date, but historically it's always been statewide voting day. The budget meeting, you have a lot more flexibility with to determine as a committee and as a school board as to when that meeting is, but I'm just putting it when it historically has been. And then you would move back from there. And I just wanted to present this to have you folks have an initial discussion and then also give me direction on how you wish to see this developed between now and your next meeting, which is until almost a month from now. So I just want to make sure there's enough direction given to me in order to work with the superintendent to bring you back a real solid draft for the November 25th meeting.
Do I hear any discussion from the committee on these dates in this recommendation?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mark.
So I'm assuming we're gonna meet once a week at least. Is it possible, even though we've changed the board meeting time, that should we need additional time, that we can piggyback a board meeting, or that won't be an option this year?
No, you can always piggyback. It's just going to be harder this year because the board meets at 6 and not 7. So really to do it on a board night would be really difficult, I think, for most committee members historically, because
Unless you did it after the board meeting would end at, say, 7:30, you could extend that.
Okay, so in a pinch,
Yep.
if we're feeling that, we have that option.
correct.
Right, but I think theoretically you wouldn't necessarily need to because you have every Tuesday without any sort of limitation on those nights. Not that you want to have a marathon 4-hour meeting or anything, but I think that not having it backed up against the board meeting should theoretically allow plenty of time.
Great, thank
And
you.
part of that discussion last year, just as to kind of go back to last year. And again, committee's different, has different members, can take a different direction for sure, but was, do we want to go 2 hours and have fewer meetings? And again, last year, every other meeting, that was difficult to do up against a board meeting, but you as a committee get to choose however you want to develop the schedule, or for me to help draft a schedule for your review.
And also just to fill in the committee, when we were changing, eliminating committees and rewriting the committee schedule, I did speak with Colin about potentially putting less finance meetings on the schedule where you wouldn't be backed up against the board meetings. And where we fell, because this was back in the summer, where Colin and I both fell was, let's put it on for every week. And then if you find that, because it's much better to cancel a meeting or remove it from the schedule than to add one, which is why there is one scheduled every week from January through the end of April, with the exception of if there's a holiday or anything. So that's kind of where we came up with those dates, figuring if we cancel one, that's, better than having to add any.
So just as a reminder, this is last year's schedule. This is not a proposed or a draft of a schedule for the upcoming year. I just wanted you to see what was done last year for dates, just to be clear. I think the other part is just as a general note of how the flow has typically gone is January is pretty much reports out from department leaders and principals. By the end of January, early February, we're getting an initial state subsidy report. February is really starting to pull together staffing, all of those requests from January, debriefing on that and trying to get to a point where by the end of February, we've got pretty much a first run at a budget pulled together. And then March into mid-April is taking it from that very initial draft of early February, or the end of February, and really getting to a point that's about 6 weeks or so there before the board approves it to really say, okay, here's where the first draft is at. How do we get to the finish line of our proposed budget that goes before the school board for approval in April? So just as a typical, it does not have to stay that way, doesn't have to be that way, but that is historically what the finance committee has done for a budget process and timeline.
Having been on the finance committee for 3 years now and chairing it for 1 year, we're gonna need the time. We're gonna need to schedule weekly meetings. As Jody said, it's okay if we reach that point where we can cancel one, but we're better off scheduling it. There's a lot of informative work done in January, as Colin said, with principals coming in, department heads coming in with information and presenting. And then a lot of work done then with Dr. Markey and Dr. Doyle along with those department heads. But once they come forward with the information, we start paring things down, and the interaction is more directly with Colin and Steve and Amanda. So I would recommend that we do schedule weekly meetings. And I think we got to really, do the work, get it done, because it gets tight at the end. We have deadlines that have to be met by the finance department. And that district budget meeting date of 5/5/26 makes sense to me. And I would recommend to the committee that we support that. And I also think it makes a lot of sense for the budget to be on the ballot during the regular scheduled statewide election date. Any input from committee members on this info? I have Jen.
Just looking at my calendar, not that this probably means anything to a bunch of people, but I'm showing that there's the middle school chorus concert that same night. Yes, because it's already in my schedule. Which they tend to do that in the cafeteria. So
That would be a disruption.
well, that's what I'm saying. So like, is it already?
Well, yeah, we'd have that whole audience to be there.
I just didn't know if that like is a thing or they would be forced to move it.
I don't know how they scheduled that. It's been on the schedule for May 5th since the end of last budget season for this year for the budget meeting. So I don't know how at a school-based level that was scheduled with that on there, but.
Could you look into that? For the next meeting,
Mhm.
going to the library?
Yeah, I just
Yeah, good catch on
would
that,
be a
Jen.
conflicting.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a huge.
Yeah. Thank you, Colin, for looking into that, as Dr. Markey suggested. We'll get that wrinkle resolved and figure it out from there. But everyone agree that we'll make a commitment to scheduling weekly meetings. I think probably scheduling a 2-hour meeting, and if we can get done before that, makes sense. And Anyone object to having those be 2-hour meetings weekly? Okay,
Do you want those meetings to be at 6 or 5:30? Historically, during budget season, they've been 5:30 in order to help not be here. So if it goes 2 hours or 2.5 hours, but it's up to you folks, whatever you want to do.
can everyone make 5:30?
Better for me.
Okay. I don't see anyone saying they can't. So let's move forward as we did previous year with the earlier meeting at 5:30. And
You have something?
I was looking for when we reconfigured committees and the board, I was looking for consistency where every meeting was at 6 o'clock. And I'm looking through last year's minutes for the finance committee,
mhm.
and I have found one meeting from January to March that was more than 2 hours, and it was 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I think I don't foresee you being here until, 9 o'clock. But I mean, it is the will of the committee. If you want to do 5:30,
Well, the
then
5:30
that's your choice.
also centered, the 5:30 meeting also centered around the fact that we were meeting before the school board every other week, and we were pressed for time. And so what's the will of the committee? 5:30 or 6?
I can do either, but I don't really want to commit to more than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like I didn't join this to be going more than 2 hours
We,
every week.
I think she's onto something. I think that with so many meetings, I think that the work could be done if Colin presented in a way that with the intention of 90 minutes.
Hmm.
I think they could go longer than 90 minutes, but as a general rule, I think most meetings, because they're so regular, I can't think of any school district anywhere that has as many budget meetings as we have and for the duration that we have. So I think you could get the work done with an understanding that they might go 2 hours, but Colin has the goal of trying to keep them.
And,
Yeah.
and you're right, Jody. I mean, for several years, they haven't, they've typically been an hour and a half. Sometimes they did go a little more, but they have never been huge marathon sessions for weekly budget meetings. But I just wanted to lay out, because we have new members on the committee, I just wanted to make sure that everyone had the information to make a decision.
and Jody is absolutely right. Colin does a great job of scheduling this out, and getting people before us, and moving the agenda along. And I'll of course be right at his side, making sure that we do as well. So between the two of us, I don't think we'll be seeing any marathons. The only time that would happen is if there's some sort of a controversial topic that we're looking at funding or not funding. So the people want to then go with the 6 because Jody had tried to have everyone coincide and have it be uniform? Yeah, I think you're right, Jen. So if I hear no objections, let's do the 6. And we won't go beyond the 2 hours, I don't imagine. So we don't have to vote on it. It's just procedural. That's what we'll do. And Colin, you'll bring more information back to us on that May 5th date, and
Yep, I will get with Kelly.
we might have to work
and
around
talk
that.
through that.
Okay, well. Sounds like a plan then. Any further discussion on the schedule part of the budget process? Any questions on the budget process itself that Colin or Dr. Markey could answer for you? All right. We will move on to capital planning update, item J.
So based upon your feedback received last week, I added a couple of items, Mark, including the Waterboro fire lane. I did do a narrative additions for tonight. So if you go to the narrative page, the last one we had from last week is in the middle of the second page, which was irrigation. I added some more history and descriptions on, and I'll go through them relatively quickly here. The next items that I've added for this week in the narrative are really about things that we've talked about in the past at a finance committee level over the years that have been kind of more on the important side. The first being the bus barn facility. That, as we've talked about before, is one that's been on here. That facility, again, at one point, many years ago, there was a discussion about the potential to move that, and an in-depth review of that and where it could potentially go and what the design and costs would be like and all of that. That one, and the reason it came up at that point was again about the high school campus, about traffic and about safety. That one is a really important one. There's one way in and out of the bus barn facility. And it's right through the middle of the high school campus. And that was really a safety and risk on multiple different levels. So that's why that is there. I added flooring. Flooring is another big one. In fact, Ben and I were just talking about flooring for the upcoming summer today in a different context. Just like doors, there is a lot of flooring in this district. And I'm going to be very direct about it. We do what we can, and we do a fairly relatively good job at what we do, but it's not nearly in accordance with if you took every piece of flooring in the district, did the useful life, divided it by the number of years that we do that amount of flooring on a rotating schedule to keep up with it. The other real difficulty with flooring is, especially in the past 2 or 3 years, with the types of hazardous materials and the testing and the requirements to mitigate hazardous materials. We think of asbestos, but there are others. It gets very expensive very quickly if we have to mitigate various hazardous materials. So that is one. I added vehicle access, egress, and parking. You can kind of tell some of these really align with what the Finance Committee did 5-10 years ago before COVID, and where the focus of the committee was at that point. You can reflect on that with, for instance, Waterboro Elementary School or with Lyman Elementary School. I added in here that the improvements that still really are the most vital at this point are Lyme, Shapley, and Alfred, but also the high school campus. So that is one that we had started. We then ran against some budget constraints and some funding of the Capital Reserve Fund, and then that took kind of a back burner and was placed on a low simmer on a back burner. So, but it still exists. Gym floor replacements. That is one where you saw on the tour, we've done 2 or 3 over the past several years. And there are others that you saw on the tour that at the end of their useful life. And Waterboro and Shapley in particular. You also saw things like the high school where we did a major resurfacing of that. We didn't replace it. And that looks very nice and will hold up for several more years. But again, kind of have to plan ahead on some of these, but the most significant right now are certainly Waterboro and Shapley. 15-mile-an-hour zone lights. A lot of school districts are starting to go to something much more visible than what we have. We have a very old system in the district, and this, even though we don't have a lot of students who walk to school, these zone lights are really important for bus safety, student safety, and accessing egress for parents and pick up and drop off. So that kind of goes with the vehicle access and parking, but in a different vein, in order to really update those systems, provide safety. Alfred Elementary is one in particular that would require something a lot more expansive in order to really do it right than just a road sign. I think in a lot of cases, what you're seeing in many districts is a road sign, whether it's electric or solar, that has a speed, it has flashing lights, it has a lot more than just one little orange light that blinks and says 15 mile an hour. And those have been proven to be effective in a lot of places. So that is an item on here. Stadium improvements kind of goes with the bus barn. Clearly, we did a stadium project 10 years ago. The project was intended to be a lot more than what was approved. And the goal was always, we'll get back to it. And we'll build up capital reserve funds, we'll do fundraising, we'll do donations, we'll do grants. And here we are 10 years later, and none of that has occurred. So I think really you kind of see the flavor of what I added from last week's list to this one. And the reason I chose the items I did to kind of supplement, if you will, on the initial of last week. This is a moving document. This is not something that's stagnant. It's not something we'll complete at some point and say, okay, let's put it on a shelf. The whole goal of the strategic plan is to continually evaluate, continually review, and for us internally, but also you as a committee to say, okay, we're going to start setting priorities. We're going to start setting, this is what we want to do. But that could change. And it could change for various reasons. It could change because look at vehicle access, egress, and parking. 10, 12 years ago, folks would never have imagined we are where we are today with the quantity of parents and guardians who drop their children off at school. It's just grown. Life has changed. People's lives have changed. And their desire to drop off versus ride a bus has changed. Therefore, we as an organization have to change to meet those demands. The hard part with any items involving buildings, infrastructure, those things, none of them are cheap or inexpensive. We kind of talked about this last week. Mark, to your point, yeah, we will start building in some cost ranges and other things as we go through this process as well. But even for tonight, you can look at this list, you can start reading some of these narratives, and for each of us, we can look at that and say, there's a lot more there than we know we have in a capital reserve fund already. And now it's about then drilling down on these items and going through and really having discussions about where are the priorities? What are the priorities? How do we rank those priorities? And then back to Mark's comment from last week is really finding out, okay, how much money is it going to take in order to do those? Because again, you may choose to do a smaller priority, such as a 15 mile an hour zone light, because there's some dollars available and forgo something else. I can tell you that Ben and I work with this every day, day in and day out, and it's hard because there are a lot of needs. We've done a good job as a district in really maintaining what those priorities are over the past 10 or 15 years and really building. I think for those who have been around this district a long time, if you walk around and you start really adding up what's been done in the past 10 or 15 years, there's a lot. And now we're at that next step in the strategic process of saying, okay, what are the next steps in order to meet goal 4 of the strategic plan and do it in a cost-effective, efficient manner and meet the needs of students, staff, and the community. That's what I have for tonight. Happy to go over anything in more detail, but I really think over the next several weeks until we meet again, really spend some time looking at the listing and also the narrative and come with really, what do you need more detail or want more explanation on? Because I'm more than happy to go into any of these topics that we've already started to narrate out, as well as any others.
Are there any questions tonight for what Colin has presented to us. Mark?
My one observation would be that as we begin these deliberations, my first priority is health and safety. Certainly, I would like to see, it'd be wonderful to complete this whole list or to say we can do everything on the list. But I would say to you that as I deliberate, one of the biggest concerns I'm going to have is that we take care of health and safety first.
Yep.
And then what's left over can go to, I just bought a hot dog at the concession stand tonight, and it needs, there's no doubt that the concession stand is aging out too, and, they do a great job with what they have. But before that, I look at health and safety. So I want to set that as a parameter.
No, and I think that's an important one for sure and is a top priority. Also, keep in mind that you're not just looking at the next 6 months or 12 months. So what is not a health and safety item today, but we know will be in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And I'll just pick one off of this, leach fields. You can say, well, Colin, nothing's going wrong today, right? Nope. But I also can tell you from our audits of those that it's not a today issue. It's not an 11th hour and 59-minute issue. But I can also tell you if we're not proactive in doing something about them, we also will not be able to be reactive to solve that when it does become a health and safety issue. Shapley's a good example of that. Our audit said Shapley was the next one. You can see from this listing, there's 3 others in a preferred replacement order for those. They aren't inexpensive. You're talking just off the top. You're talking based upon those anywhere from 200 to probably 3 or 350 for any of those schools individually for a replacement system. So again, even though today you say, well, then we don't do leach fields, that's not a health and safety issue, but I can tell you the risk is that when it becomes a health and safety issue, it's not a progressive health and safety issue. It's an immediate, and then we are sitting here as administrators and leaders of the district, or you as a committee saying, well, what happened? Why didn't we do something about that? So I do want to make sure that we're always thinking about not just today's health and safety, but also how serious is this? Is this a 2-year or 3-year item, Colin, or is this a 10-year item? Because that makes a difference in health and safety.
Anything else, Mark?
That's a great point. Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions for Colin? I think it's real important that we as a committee analyze the lists, read the narrative closely. I would also like to get more input from the administration. I appreciate knowing what some of the priorities are for you and your staff, as well as our administrators, and as well as Dr. Markey. Not that we're a yes council that just says yes to whatever you recommend, Colin. We debate and discuss things.
Yeah.
But your expertise, Dr. Markey's expertise, Ben's expertise, and the school principals, they all have ideas as well as to what priorities are for safety and so forth. And I agree with Mark that I'm sure as a committee, health and safety is going to be at the top of how we're evaluating things. But we need to hear from our administrators and our in-house experts on what some of your ideas are, if you could think about bringing that forward. And the other thing that Mark brought up at the previous meeting is what's the money picture look like? What are some of the estimates going to be so that we can start thinking about, well, can we or can't we afford it? I agree, the concession stand's been there. I worked it, I think, probably 30 years or more ago when I had kids that were young. So more input would be great.
And I think it's important for you to know that Ben meets regularly with all the principals and department leaders, developing not just their operational budget for 1 year, but he meets regularly with them, getting their input all the time, and they each have a priority listing of improvements to their respective buildings or departments of what they're looking for. And just like we're doing here, that's an ever-changing list. So when we start the budget process or capital planning, please know that Ben is meeting with those folks on an ongoing, regular, and consistent basis to get their input. So when, for instance, I'll just pick Alfred, it begins with A, it's the first one that comes to mind. Ben is meeting with Kathy regularly and going, okay, what are your concerns? When you saw the building tour, one of her concerns was that window in the entry lobby in order to, that stemmed from them having conversations and saying, what are your priorities? Because Ben isn't in that building every day on an operational perspective, but also for the principal to also understand the operational. And so it's really that reaching common ground and meeting of the mind, so to speak, that I want you to also understand is happening, even though you don't see that as a committee behind the scenes on a regular ongoing basis, because that's the only way we can be the most efficient and effective with what we do internally in coming up with these priorities.
Thanks for pointing that out. That's important and for us to know. So anything else on capital planning update this evening, folks? Hearing none. Has everyone had a chance to approve the warrants? Everyone had a chance to sign the warrants? There's only one really tonight, I
There's
believe.
one, you met last week, so there's one.
Yeah. If everyone's had a chance to sign them, can we have a motion to approve and a second? Eric moves. Do we hear?
Second.
Mark seconds. Any discussion on the warrants?
Just a quick question. Just a curiosity, I see we pay Leslie University. Line must be involved in some, it's called Science of Literacy. I was just curious what that was.
Top of my head
Um,
to answer that question.
What was it?
Science of Literacy. The money goes to Leslie University, two $150 amounts. If not this meeting, I was just curious.
Oh, that's probably, that went through a curriculum grant. So I am assuming, and a curriculum line item. So I am assuming that that is some program, because otherwise it would be professional development line and it's not. So I'm assuming it's a program that curriculum is using for literacy, but I can find out more details.
Okay, I just thought it was neat that we're working with Leslie University on literacy. That's all my question is.
I look at these so closely, I didn't even catch that because I just assumed it was course reimbursement. So,
Oh,
so I apologize for that.
Mark and I were talking briefly about warrants before the meeting. You might recall that, that Judith, had reached out to Colin. Colin's putting the warrants out there for us to be able to access before we come to meetings. And so, Mark's gonna start reviewing them like many of us do before we come, so that we have questions. If you have questions in advance, you know, forward them directly to me or forward them directly to Colin. And we'll make sure that, we can, you know, have the information to answer your questions, during the meeting itself. All in favor of the warrants? It's unanimous. Next meeting date.
Next meeting is November 25th at 6.
November 25th at 6 PM. Just for transparency, I might not be available to make that meeting, Mark, if you could take over as co-chair for that.
absolutely.
So the meeting is adjourned at 6:46.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Colin.